Hello, folks. Real pleasure to have a special episode of Burning Platform today with two of my fellow curmudgeons. You'll see pretty quickly what I mean by that. But it's also curmudgeon Christmas. So certainly Frank and I have the right spirit. Dennis is grumpy as ever. He hasn't worn his Christmassy stuff. Frank, show us your ugly sweater.
It's from Christmas movie. Is that it?
All right. Well, listen, let's get in and go into the first part, which is the, little bit down memory lane. I'm going to go down about 15 years, and Frank and Dennis haven't seen these photographs, so they may be just as surprised as you are. Guys, do you remember this?
Oh, there we go.
This is
This
where the term curmudgeon started.
Curmudgeon Row.
Curmudgeon Row. Susie Foran at Plex.
There you go.
Special sign made for it. I wasn't supposed to be part of this group. These guys coerced me to be in there. So I'm really not a curmudgeon, but that qualified me as it. But Susie, Susie had a gorgeous baby boy this year. So thank you, Susie, if you're watching this.
Yeah, we got famous for being curmudgeons at most of these events, throwing very pessimistic questions toward the vendors. So we got to be
Hey, there's a lot of other reasons why we qualify. But here is one from, I think, 2010. There's Frank and Jeff Nolan, another of our friends, when he was with SAP still. And this is at Mel's Diner in downtown San Francisco.
That's right.
Frank, you and I were both had a little excess weight back then. We're both looking good now. And
yeah, definitely.
So is Dennis.
Well, we've all lost weight. All three of us. Look at Den here. Dennis is best I've seen him since I've known him.
And Dennis has lost 2 pounds up his beard. I mean, that's it. Even lighter. So this is one from what, 2008? This is Pumpkin Girl, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, she's in high school now, so she's a little bigger.
This is Frank in his kitchen showing his granddaughter. What were you making?
We were making fried pumpkin. That's Italian-American tradition. Actually, this is her kitchen, her mom's kitchen, parents' kitchen. And I was teaching her how to make this dish, which I used to make every year around this time. Fried pumpkin.
This is one, I forget when, but this is with another of our friends, Stacy Fish, one of the nicest ladies in enterprise software. She's even nice to Dennis.
I spoke to Stacy recently, and she's now doing some interesting developer work with our good friends over at SAP. She managed to escape analyst relations.
Well, yeah, I haven't talked to her in a while.
I don't blame her. I don't blame her for that. Would you?
Absolutely not.
All right, well, Dennis, now this.
Oh God!
Tell us about this. You had a little more hair, and you used to brew your own beer, right?
Well, I owned a brewery at one stage.
Are you kidding?
Wow.
Yeah,
I never knew that. I never knew that.
I owned a brewery for a number of years in France because I couldn't get decent beer, so it's like, well, I might as well brew my own. I used to make it, and it was kind of like moonshine, just kind of the local bar, hey, do you want to try some English beer? Yeah, have you got some? Yeah, come down to my place, and that kind of stuff. I sold it after I moved out of France, but yeah, those were my hippie days.
Well, if you still had it, they would have commissioned you to make PPE this year.
Yeah.
This is one when Dennis used to lug around, 20 pounds of equipment at the different
20,
conferences?
More like 30 pounds.
More like 30 pounds. This is the Workday Rising in 2013. And I guess, I don't know what, you were smiling, so obviously I said something to make you smile. But it was pretty impressive, the equipment you had. Way before all of us got video equipment for Zoom.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's me.
The curmudgeon. Here's the curmudgeon.
There we go. That was also at Mel's Diner.
That's
and you
true.
can have that today as well.
And, just to get even, in my last book, the editor said, look, Vinnie, there's so many acronyms. You really should have a glossary at the front of the book. So I included something called, do you speak SAPese? And in there, I had squeezed in this little acronym. My damn editor caught it and deleted it.
So,
Dennis, I would have, immortalized you with this little thing in the book.
Yeah, just one moment, Vinnie. Let me just comment on this for a second here. I was thinking about this. So, I became part of a worldwide, independent analyst community back around 2005 or 6. And, it started through blogging. It's how we really got to know each other. And I want to thank Dennis. Dennis, you were the first person that reached out to me in the blogger community. I remember that phone call. I remember sitting in my office, gave me a phone call. I said, who is this guy? I want to find out what he's all about. And, that led to so many friendships and relationships around the world. And Vinnie, you were the first of the bloggers that I actually met in person. I mentioned this the other day to you. You don't remember this, but it was a Lawson conference in San Diego. And I went down there, I met with you and Michael Crigsman, sat at the bar, had a drink, offered to buy your drink, and you wouldn't let me. So anyway, we've been friends ever since then.
I wonder why I denied, but you buy me a drink. Usually I'm pretty cheap. and Frank, Dennis, both of you kind of encouraged me to get into blogging. That was kind of a.
We had nothing better to do at the time.
Frank, it was around the same time. I started blogging in 2004. So
yeah, it's
great to reconnect again 15 years later. And
that's right.
Both of you look wonderful. So good to see that. Well, listen, let's look at 2020. A lot of people say it was a terrible year. Was it? Frank, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, it has been, all admissions, it's been a terrible year on a number of fronts. I think, earlier in the year, I started with this expression was, I don't like to say I can't wait for something, right? I can't wait for this conference. I can't wait for Christmas. I can't wait because to me, at our age, every day is precious. And if you say I can't wait, it means you're going to skip all the days in between. But you know what? I can't wait until 2020 is over. So yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your personal life. Tell us a little bit about what you saw in the enterprise world that either impressed you or you would give them turkeys.
No, I have been very, very impressed with, and you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago on video, with how the IT, community, enterprise IT really pulled together through this pandemic. And, for whatever reason, I've always been obsessed with pandemics. Back in the mid 2000s, I wrote how to incorporate a pandemic scenario in your disaster recovery plan. It's a good piece of work. I pulled it out. We've refreshed it a couple times since then. Even this year, we refreshed it. But even going back to the original report, I called all the things correctly that needed to be done. But what I never anticipated is how quickly the IT community could come through this and pull, some companies based on our surveys we've seen have gone, virtual basically overnight in terms of work from home and so on. And as a result, there is really no recession in IT spending this year from what we've seen in our, surveys. As many companies are increasing their IT budget as are cutting them. So we talk about this K-shaped recovery, right? So some are increasing, some are decreasing, but overall, the IT organizations have pulled through extremely well. And the technology that we're using like right now has gotten so good that it's possible for many jobs now to be done entirely remotely. Of course, there's a lot of them that can't be, but, we're just not tied to offices anymore. And I think, as we look forward, we're going to see, in fact, our surveys show we're going to see this continue into the future.
Dennis, how about you? Personal life and enterprise world. What has stood out for you in 2020?
Well, I mean, personally, first of all, my youngest son and his wife had a little baby boy right at the beginning of the year that we managed to see the princely sum of once.
Yep.
But but that was something, right? And we have a great grandson that arrived 4 weeks ago, and we have another one. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know if it's a daughter or a son, but whatever it is, due very shortly. So from that standpoint, I'm really glad that I'm back in this country, because I've no idea how we would have ever dealt with any of that stuff living where I was. But then, you know, we're all stuck in it. So, you know, those have been two really good things out of the gloom of this year, if you will. You know, it's just been bloody awful. You know, people call me and they say, "Hey, how are you?" And I say, "Well, you really want to know? Ask me that again, and I'll tell you, because I'm really bloody fed up, right?" Now, that sounds strange because I've worked remotely for 30 years. So why should this be any different? Well, what's different is that I don't have the freedom that I once had to be able to go out and to do things. So, you know, when that's taken away from you, then it changes the whole psychology of how you have to work and live your life. And that's been a really hard adjustment for a lot of people, including myself. So, you know, I'm not going to pretend that everything's okay, because it's far from okay. But it has had upsides, quite unquestionably. Family-wise, there's that. I have had the opportunity to really get back into learning a lot more about the history of my immediate predecessors, right? Because I'm a post-war baby, like Frank is, and you're not so far behind, Vinnie. And I'm really into the whole sort of tank building thing, which some people might find is a little bit bizarre, but there's an enormous history around it, which is incredibly complicated. And if you want to talk about innovation, right? I watched a video last night that talked about how the Americans looked at the beaches at Omaha and places like that and saw all those obstacles that had been put in the way and thought, you know what, they're going to make great hedgerow choppers to put on the front of Sherman tanks, right? I mean, this is real innovation in real time, because I can't fight a war, right? I have not seen anything remotely approaching that in this year, right? Like Frank says, we've all got the technology, and thank goodness we have, otherwise we couldn't do any of this stuff. And I think we have to acknowledge that. But quite honestly, I've been really disappointed with the lack of innovation that I've seen among companies. Loads and loads of innovation in the SMB space, but very little of what I would call genuine innovation, because I thought that this year represented an opportunity to completely reset what we think about what business looks like going forward, and that just hasn't happened, at least not that I've seen anyway. But maybe I've missed everything because I've been stuck under a rock for 8 months. I don't know. But I would hope that 2021 would allow genuine innovation to come forward. I mean, we're nowhere near the whole idea of the frictionless enterprise, for example, you know?
Save that for the next segment. We'll talk a little bit about 2020.
Yeah, sure, of course.
So I'm going to be the contrarian here, as usual. To me, 2020 allowed me, because I started a series called Acrobatics During the Crisis. So I interviewed 75 different C-level executives in different industries. And honestly, like Frank, I saw a lot in IT, right? A lot of somersaults in IT, but I saw innovation in healthcare like I have never seen before. You know, not just the clinical trials for the vaccines, the heroics in the hospitals, the learning around COVID day by day, week after week, just amazing. The therapeutics, the amount of tests we've been able to do in such a short period of time. And in different industries, I've seen, you know, the whole logistics cold chain. I could go on and on and on, okay? So I've actually been very impressed, very heartened by so much of the positive innovation and positive energy that has happened. To your point, Dennis, the small businesses, my God, the survival instinct, the stuff they have done to pivot and go into new areas. You know, Ray Lane, you and I know Ray Lane, right? He was telling me about one of his portfolio companies. They're in the food business. So they have kiosks where they serve fresh salads and fresh food. Well, the kiosks were mostly in airports and corporate cafeterias. Overnight, the business died, right? So he said, Vinnie, I thought this guy was going to lay 80 to 90% of his staff off and just wait for the economy to improve. He says the guy had the bright idea to go to hospitals and say, could you use some fresh food? And they said, we'll take everything you have. Whatever was left over, he went to schools and they said, our corporate cafeteria, our catering service can deliver. We'll take whatever you have left over. Ray said he was back to 90% revenue within a month, right? So we've seen amazing acrobatics. I've seen in the last companies also that I never thought possible in so short a time. Now, let me talk about my personal 2020. And let me share again a few more screens here.
Who the hell's that?
So 30 years with my beautiful wife, Margaret. So big accomplishment for 2020.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 2 kids.
Beautiful.
Rita's back with us. Her hospitality business obviously cratered, so she started her own business from home. And Tommy is in Colorado, so we've only been able to play games with him via Zoom and so on, but he's doing well and coping pretty well. So that's been great. What has been wonderful for us, I have a travel bug. Margaret does too. We have discovered Florida, especially the West Coast. We have done so many local trips, mostly day trips, but occasionally staying in a clean Marriott. We've seen so much of Florida. It's been unbelievable how much history there is here that we didn't know about. Right? Yeah. That's been another positive in this year. I've been on. Tomorrow, I will complete a 100-day streak of 10,000 steps a day.
Wow.
That's been tough to do with all the video and so on.
It is hard.
So, that's been another way it's kept me fairly positive. And then finally, as I mentioned, I've loaded, by the end of the year, I'll have uploaded 3,000 minutes of video. Okay, that's quite a bit, but most of this has been very positive conversations with executives on how they have coped through 2020. It's been about innovation, it's been about leadership, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been my 2020, guys. A little bit better than what you guys are reporting. And like you say, it's been a miserable year for so many people. So many people have lost friends, family. Politics have caused friendships to be lost. Let's move forward. Let's talk about 2021. Dennis, you start this time. What would you like to see, or what do you expect to see?
I'd really like to see, if we're going to talk about technology, what I'd really like to see is some sort of standard come together. And I don't like using the word standard because it has all sorts of connotations. But I'd really like to see a standard come forward around the notion of identity, right? Because if we can, as an industry, can solve that, whether it's us as an industry or the banking community, and I've got feet in both camps there, then to me, the doorway is open to solving many of the problems that we've faced, certainly in this last year, that have become exacerbated, but have faced since forever, right? And that's all around the notion of trust. Who do you trust? And what basis do you trust them on, right? Now, I've seen some really interesting stuff done there. I recently spoke with Rod Boothby. Remember Rod? Who's been at Santander Bank for the last 18 months or what have you, working with Ayaz Kazi. And they've been working on this whole area of identity and open sourcing it as a way forward. They've got a bunch of other banks around them, but it's nowhere near critical mass. And earlier I'd spoken with...
We could have used that in our election last month.
Yeah, well, let's not go there. I also spoke recently with Meg Baer, who's been doing work with Yvette Cameron's Velocity outfit, again on this whole area of identity, but being able to have sovereign ownership over your identity, which is the critical part of it, right? I think this opens a lot of doors. It's a complex, it's a really hard problem to solve, which is why it interests me for a start. But very, very few people seem to be looking at that. And I'd love to be able to see genuine progress there. Whether it's possible is always debatable. You know, do industries like banks take the lead? Does the IT industry take the lead? Who does this? It's a vast unknown. The other thing I'd like to see, or I'm hoping to see rather, is some sort of movement towards getting away from the tyranny of the quarterly reporting cycle, particularly on Wall Street, but equally in the UK and elsewhere, because it's quite clear that the obsession with growth has, in many senses at least, not served the customer as well as we would have liked, right? And people have been talking about this and talking about it for years. I think the conditions are right now for that kind of change to occur. The trouble is, you know, does Wall Street even care?
I think
probably not.
I think it's premature, given the speed of IPOs and so on. I think it's business as usual for a while. But I mean, I'd like to see what you're saying happen, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, the bubble mentality keeps all this crap going, right? I mean, you look at some of the IPO valuations, for instance. I can't even begin to get my head around some of the numbers that they're talking about there. But that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking much more long term, because I think that when I talk about 2020 as being in some senses a lost opportunity, and I hear what you say about healthcare there, Vinnie, totally with you. But really, was there a choice? Maybe not, right? And
you know, I mean, innovation happens when there is desperation.
Yeah.
But you know, on the other hand, you've seen people who have rolled over and just hidden for 9 months, right?
Oh, sure.
So
Sure.
You got to credit people who have stepped up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I absolutely do credit people that have stepped up. But I'm hoping, I'm not forecasting because that's the last thing that I ever do. That's Phil likes of Frank and you guys. Yeah, it's okay. You guys can make fools of yourselves all day long.
Into Frank.
No, but it's okay. But I would like to think that we could move in that kind of direction. Whether we will, who knows? But I rather suspect that 2021 will be a rerun of 2020 in many ways. That's what I'm kind of. Oh yeah, there is another thing that I'm thinking about, and that's it would be great to see the real rise of a plant-based economy. And I say this for very selfish reasons, because I've invested in a vegan outfit. I'm not vegan by any stretch, and you all guys know that, having seen all the meat I cook, right? But plant-based economies do look as though they've got some real potential to help us going forward into the future. And I kind of like the sound of it. I mean, my son's a vegan, and I hate going around to his place for dinner because it's like, what am I going to eat, right? But it's like, where's my bacon, dude? You know,
you can have tofu-based bacon.
Oh man, oh no. But that's something that I would like. Something I'd like to see as an alternative more than anything else.
I think you've seen quite a bit of movement in plant-based food.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A lot of burgers are not meat-based anymore.
Yeah. But anyway, those are the kinds of things that I'd like to see, and I'd like to think that we could be a lot more sensitive to each other. Maybe this is an opportunity to, you know, maybe fight a little less and maybe cooperate a little more. I don't know. Like to see it. Sounds strange coming from me, but there we go.
It has brought out the best and the worst of people. So it'd be nice to see more of the best of people. Yes. Yeah. Frank, what about you?
Yeah, let me just say something real quick about Dennis here. Dennis, I really admire, you know, as we talked about off camera, you know, you're getting close to retirement here, and you see all your, you know, videos and pictures, you know, building tanks and barbecue, you know, American barbecue. And you think, how does this guy have time for anything, you know, as far as analyst work? But you're still cranking out material. You're still thinking deeply about a lot of these things that, you know, I just admire your bandwidth that you're able to take so much on. So,
well, I don't sleep so much, Frank.
I noticed that, you know, I've noticed that. So anyway, Vinnie, I'm very glad you didn't ask us to try to make predictions, because I think if anything I'd like to see going forward in 2021 is every analyst get out of the predictions business.
Yay!
because not a single one called 2020. If you go back, I'm about ready to go back and look up what some of our friends published back, as far as predictions at the end of 2019. Not a single one called anything significant that actually happened in 2020. So I hope that this experience puts a little humility back into the analyst community and stop trying to predict what's going to happen, because we don't know. 2020 is not over yet. So, who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. So, and like Dennis said, it's possible 2021 is going to be like 2020. So that's the first thing I would hope, going forward. So
Frank, before you go forward, and at the risk of sounding overly self-promoting, I absolutely recommend reading Brian Summer and John Reed's Unpredictions for 2021, because if you want a really good satirical take on that industry, go for it.
That's a parody predictions column, which I appreciate every year. So that doesn't.
Well, it's count. Not. It's not a parody. It's real, man. they think really deeply about that stuff. I can assure you.
Well, they get Brian and John are good friends. They get a pass from what I just said. So.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So let me go back to this issue about innovation, and I just read this story about the vaccine development. There's this Chinese scientist that I think ought to have been named Person of the Year. Okay, if Benioff wants to name Person of the Year in Time magazine, that's who should have gotten it, because this scientist in January had sequenced the genome for the COVID, the SARS-CoV-2, whatever it's called, that causes COVID. In like 2 weeks, he had it mapped, and he then, at great personal risk, published it, open sourced it, at great risk, because, as we know, under the Chinese regime, they weren't at the time wanting to be very open about what was going on. And I believe it was in 2 weeks, and I forget where the scientists were, in Australia or someplace, they had actually developed a vaccine that now is being, so it's like, talk about, they say normally these types of vaccines take 10 years to develop, but it just shows what happens when, with open source, with knowledge sharing, with the regulatory environment being more cooperative, the whole time since, February, when the vaccine was actually designed, was basically almost all clinical trials. So I think, going forward, if we can see more innovation at that type of speed, I think there's going to be great hope, going forward. And I think this vaccine is going to be a big hit. I really do. And not just one, but several. I plan to get it as soon as it's available. And I think, being a senior citizen, we're going to get priority for it. So anyway, see this applied in other areas for innovation.
Wait. Speak for yourself, senior citizen.
Frank, I'm with you. We're senior citizens. That's Tower 3, so he can shut up, right?
That's right.
Frank, it's not just a clinical trial. The logistics of distributing the vaccine,
right?
Just mind-boggling. Especially the Pfizer one at -70. Just the
right.
In a lot of ways, governments have stepped up. I mean, I don't much care for big government, but I've seen local governments, I've seen state governors, I've seen national leaders step up. There's been a lot of innovation. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and then on the technology side, I think some things happened that we just didn't anticipate. And I remember, I think you both were on this interview with, or analyst briefing with Steve Miranda. And, the question, somebody asked him, how is this affecting the pandemic, affecting, Oracle sales and implementation? And he made a comment that really resonated with me. He said, we've actually been doing faster implementations. He said, like something like 1 a day go live. And he said, basically, we've all kind of figured out that a lot of this business travel, whether it be for conferences or for implementation support and so on, is really unnecessary. And that the teams have gotten more efficient because they're not spending all this time in airports. So, as we go forward, I think, a lot of the business travel is going to come back. A lot of it isn't, because we figured out that it's just not necessary. So, it's just amazing. Entire implementations done without a single day being spent on site is just remarkable.
Don't you think, Frank, that that's a recognition of, or maybe an acceptance of something that's been lurking in the background for quite some considerable time.
I
mean,
think so.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I've gone to conferences in the last few years, and I mean, I've basically stopped doing that now, but in the last 2 or 3 years, if I was attending somewhere for a large keynote, I never went to the keynote. I'd sit and watch it in my hotel room. Why? Because I don't want to fight with 10,000 other people to get in and out the hall, right?
Right.
And sure, I'd turn up at the analyst or the media Q&As and the one-to-ones and all that stuff, but I sure as heck wasn't going to turn up to those big stage events. I get a better view. I get a better view from the cheap seats, you know?
I think a lot of us practice that, and the conference organizers didn't often recognize it, but a lot of times we had better, experience not being in the room. But yeah the analyst briefings and the social events and the booth time, the trade show floor, that was all useful time. But sitting in a keynote with 10,000 other people is not a very good experience.
Somebody made a comment that, Zoom works great for small groups, right? Like this, maybe up to 10 people. So between 10 to 100, it really falls apart. Above 100, the physical model, I don't know if people are comfortable with. So, we will need travel for probably the middle part, 10 to 100, small sales teams, small customer meetings, stuff like that, probably will continue to come back. But I hope it's not back to where we were before. Having been raised in the consulting world, we used to, it was just like the ethos. You get on a plane, go meet a customer.
Brutal.
You're done out, right? So any more points in 2021?
Vinnie, I just want to pick up on what you just said there, right? Management theory, and in fact, in practice, will tell you that no single individual can actively manage more than 9 other people, right? And at any one time. So if you think about a Zoom meeting as representing a metaphor for that, why would you ever want to sit in a room with 100 other virtual people? I mean, how the hell are you ever going to manage that, right?
Sales kickoffs, you have you have shareholder meetings, smaller shareholder meetings. There are a lot of use cases for 10 to 200 people. Anyways, so let me make my points about 2021. Okay, so at the high level, I'm fascinated with this whole headbutting that I see coming between hyperscalers and application vendors. Hyperscalers clearly have won the infrastructure as a service battle, and the software vendors are happy to not spend the capex there. Where the battle is going to come is in the platforms. SAP, Salesforce, they all have Einstein and their own machine learning and their own development platforms and integration tools and so on. I mean, why shouldn't I use Google's machine learning? Why shouldn't I use Microsoft's innovation tools? Why shouldn't I use AWS's development platform and databases and so on? So I think that's going to be a big conflict coming up. Okay. In terms of where I'd like the market to go, I hope we don't completely, as an executive said, he said, look, after every major shock, the bungee swings back. Historically, it swung back about 80%. He said, I hope this time it doesn't swing more than 50%. I hope that's true. We may get back into bad habits very quickly, especially the consulting side, especially integrators going back to, not being sensitive to their customer needs, back to aggressive sales tactics and so on. So my hope for 2021, if indeed it bounces back, with the vaccine and all that, if it bounces back, I hope the technology world doesn't go back to the bad habits that we saw for years, the last decade. Okay, so those are two of what I'd like to see in 2021. Obviously there's a lot more. I've seen so many vertical specialists emerge, step up during this last few months. The whole telemedicine area, distance learning, e-commerce, automated warehouses, fantastic. I hope they keep growing because the bigger vendors really didn't do anything in that area, right? So I am optimistic about 2021 in many different ways, but then I didn't consider 2020 to be that bad. I'm one of the few. So what else? What else, guys?
It certainly, you know, when the market collapsed in March, it certainly looked like we were going into a, you know, multi-year recession. That has not happened. I mean, it's just incredible how quickly economics have bounced back around the world. So I agree with you. It certainly looks much stronger. Looks to have been a very short-lived. Now, anything can happen in 2021, but it certainly looks like this was a very sudden and sharp economic contraction that now is bouncing back.
Frankly, the point though, you talk about K curves in your study. To me, the K curve is public companies have seen an uptick. Small to mid-sized companies, especially the restaurants and the travel-related businesses.
Right.
So
right.
It's been very uneven.
That's right. Of course. That's why it's a K. That's, you know, divergent, you know, but the two cancel each other out. So overall, we're in pretty good shape.
And I think around the globe, I think Europe will do fine. I think the US will bounce back pretty well. I'm not so sure some of the Asian and African countries. We are not hearing enough of the devastation they've had. So, you know, I mean, it's not all positive, but overall, it does look good. Final thoughts, guys.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a positive and a negative here on this one, guys. On the negative side, there is a bill to be paid for this pandemic. First of all, when does it fall due? Second, who pays for it? And what is that going to mean in terms of a cash crunch? Because I am convinced of one thing, and that there will be a cash crunch. The only question is, it's a matter of time, that's all, right? The upside, I think, is that the thing that you've talked about for many, many years, Vinnie, the need to become a polymath is now very real. And what I'd like to see is people step forward and start teaching how that happens, right? Because if my job has suddenly disappeared, what do I do? People feel helpless. They need mentorship in that area. There are plenty of people around who could do that kind of thing. And I'd love to see that go forward, because that, I believe, is going to be essential going forward. I've completely got rid of the idea of careers for life. That's how I certainly used to think. We will have successions of careers, and we're going to need people going forward.
Can I react to that, Dennis? Because I have the last 5 years been telling any young person who approaches me about advice, I've told them, take 2 or 3 years off and go to the nearest hurricane hit city and work in construction for 3 years. Not only will you pick up handy skills, you'll probably end up with $150,000 in savings. Then go get your graduate degree in computer science, data science, health tech, food tech, whatever you want, right? Dennis, none of them wanted to hear that. Hopefully
that's crazy. My brother's an educator. That's what he does or used to do for a living. And he's very clear about this. He said the notion of sending people from school direct to university doesn't make any sense whatsoever in the global environment that we have. Way better for kids to go out into the world for 2-3 years, do whatever the heck it is they want to do, go and see what the world has got to offer before even thinking about taking on additional education.
And the market screaming for that, right? We had 60 unfilled blue and trade collar jobs, but our young wanted to go to university. That was sexy, right? So hopefully we will flip around and say, listen to the market, and some skills, carpenters are never hungry. Plumbers are never hungry, right? So hopefully, to your point, yes, we need to coach our young that way, but they need to listen too.
I'm really glad that none of my kids have gone into my game. They're all plumbers and carpenters and guys like, it's like I now pay them to come to my house, right?
What else?
Thing that happened in my, personal / business life was, as you know, my 2 companies, Strativa and Computer Economics, were acquired by Avasant in February. Okay, so just before the pandemic hit, we inked the deal. And that has just been tremendous. So now I'm part of a global, much larger organization. Avasant's much larger, global, consulting research business. And I'm part of that. I'm a partner. Now I have associates and coworkers around the world, so I'm getting used to a 24/7, type being on at the call and so on. But it's been great, great interactions, great collaboration, learning a lot of new aspects of the business that I've never seen before. So a shout out to all my friends, coworkers, and associates around the world.
I'm tired with that, Frank.
Yeah,
24/7 sounds wonderful, but it ain't really.
I have to turn off the phone at certain hours of the day, so
Oh, yeah.
I should say. So yeah.
Well,
And
listen,
thank goodness for our long-suffering wives and family for putting up with us, eh?
hey,
Right.
30 years of my case. God bless Margaret.
Yeah.
Dennis, Frank, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Stay positive.
Amen.
Yep. And thank you.
Thank you for
See
your
you guys.
leadership.
See you later, guys. Cheers.
All right.
Bye.